What is good, my friends? Officially entering the Christmas season, we are so back. And old St. Nick's Lotus has got some gifts for you in the form of some very powerful, extremely underplayed commanders. All of these commanders have under 1,000 decks on EDH Rec, and they're all super interesting, especially the last deck. That's a deck I'm seriously considering building.
Don't act like that's not just to get them to stick around till the end of the video.
Okay, same thing could be said about you, buddy. This whole exchange, the little wallet bit that you got going, people could just say that this is to pad timing on the video, make it a little bit longer. Anyways, 1, I'm wearing the coat because it's freezing outside. It's warm inside. I have 0 cold tolerance. Knowing it's cold outside, that's enough for me. 2, let's get into some obscure commanders. Up first on the list is Genku Future Shaper. And no, I'm not talking about that Genku I used to go to elementary school with. I wonder what that guy's up to. We're talking about this awesome card. For 2 a white and a blue, we get a 2/5. Whenever another non-token permanent we control leaves the battlefield, choose one that hasn't been chosen and create a token with the following characteristics. Either a 2/2 white fox with vigilance, a 1/2 blue moonfolk with flying, or a 1/1 black rat with lifelink. And he also has the ability to pay 3, a blue, and a white to put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. Pretty awesome, actually. This Blink token Azorius commander seems great with, obviously, token creators like Feldar's Retreat to help flood the board and buff it, along with single target blink spells like Cloud Shift or Planar Incision to blink our commander so we can reset his ability, paired with board-wide blink spells like Lae'zel's Acrobatics or Eerie Interlude to blink our entire boards, which will 1 trigger our commander all 3 times most of the time, but also we'll run creatures like Sun Titan, Overlord of the Mistmoors to trigger Genku's ability and flood the board with tokens. With access to blue, we can run tons of really fun cards for a token strategy like Archetype of Imagination to give our board flying and make opponents lose flying, or Dowerport Mage to draw cards and help permanents leave the battlefield on our side. Not to mention the obvious Displacer Kitten. Wouldn't be bad on this list, obviously. Not to even mention our commander kind of has a built-in win condition on it. You just get to buff your whole board with +1/+1 counters, which you might say, yeah, but that's kind of a nombo, because if we're running a blink deck and we're blinking some of the stuff that has 1/1 counters on it, we're losing the 1/1 counters on it. True, but your tokens keep them because we're not going to be blinking the tokens. And 3, maybe run the Ozolith, and then you get to keep all your 1/1 counters that you're missing and blink stuff and make your tokens big. Even outside of that, I think the amount of tokens you're going to be making, putting a 1/1 counter on just the tokens, having a few fall off here and there, not that big of a deal. And the fact that it is an activated ability, you know, lends itself to maybe running a training ground, so you can make that activated ability a little bit more spammable and games a little bit quicker. What's that?
Run plenty of cards that can remove themselves from play, like Wayfarer's Bauble.
Wow, that was actually very helpful and insightful.
Wayfarer's
Yeah, listen to him.
Bauble, Ate the Spellbomb, stuff like that.
And there it is. Up next, we've got Geode Moog Ancient, which I'm actually going to probably build as well, if I'm being honest. I've been looking for a man-land deck, and this commander really supplies that. For 2 a green and a blue, we get a 2/4. When Geode Moag Ancient enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 green Forest Dryad land creature token for each time you've cast your commander from the command zone this game. At the beginning of each combat, land creatures you control get +X/+X, where X is Geode's power. Geode's really cool because it's a lands matters deck, but it doesn't matter that lands are coming into play. It just matters that the lands that do come into play also can turn into creatures. Cards like Dryad Arbor, Mutavault, are the bread and butter of this deck. Very good. Any kind of like cheap Blinkmoth Nexus, Inkmoth Nexus, Blinkmoth Nexus, Inkmoth Nexus, say that 5 times fast. Those are both very good in here as well. Yeah, there's also a ton of shenanigans to just turn your lands into creatures. Cosmium Confluence, Lanalore Loam Speaker will help turn non-creature lands into creatures. The commander itself also creates 1/1 Dryads when it comes into play, so stuff like Conjurer's Closet, Displacer Kitten, they're going to be good in here as well because you're getting more Dryads that are also lands, which is just more stuff that you can buff with your commander's ability. Deadeye Navigator, another great one to spam your commander into play.
Or in your case, Unman Land.
Hilarious. You have anything of value to throw in this time, or are we back on this bullshit?
Might Evokes or Preposterous Proportions could be good in here with the board buff.
Okay, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, throw some of those in there. Up next, we've got Lazav Familiar Stranger from Outlaws of Thunder Junction, coming in for 1, a blue and a black for a 1/4. I don't know why all the commanders on this list have big butts or why big butt commanders are not ran very much. Just some data I'd like to throw your way. This deck utilizes the Commit a Crime mechanic to not only trigger a bunch of Commit a Crime effects, but also to gain access to exiling the best creatures out of everyone's graveyard with Lazav, and then turning Lazav into the best thing that's in anyone's graveyard, which, you know, both are good. We run cards like Gissa the Hellraiser and Deep Muck Desperado as additional commit a crime triggers in the form of 2/2 zombies and mill respectively. Pair this with cards like Hex Parasite and Spatial Binding to spam crimes on each person's turn, maximizing your crime triggers. And we've got a deck you can honestly take in whatever direction you want. The idea of just trying to commit as many crimes as you can to trigger all these cards, gain access to the best thing in anyone's graveyard, I think that's enough of a jumping off point for you to kind of go whatever way you want with it.
Agreed. Take this one wherever your heart desires.
Wow, you're being super
Or
well
in Nick's case, heart disease.
And there we go. This next deck, no joke, is the only equipment and aura deck I have ever been interested in making, ever. And that's because the commander's ability allows you to run less equipments and auras, which is ironically the reason those decks aren't fun to pilot or very difficult to pilot, is you need to run enough auras and equipments to make the cards that interact with auras and equipments work, but auras and equipments require creatures. So in the deck building process, you're already kind of hitting a snag there. But with Danitha, New Benalia's Light, she gets that problem out of here. For 1 green and a white, we get a 2/2 with Vigilance, Trample, Lifelink, a real stat checker. Once during each of your turns, you may cast an aura or equipment spell from your graveyard. So we can run tons of creatures that self-mill us, like Shigeki, Jukai Visionary, the Aftermath Analyst, along with dredge creatures like Greater Moss Dog, Golgari Grave Troll. See, now running all these creatures that mill us will fill our graveyard. It'll allow us to see more of our deck. It allows us to run fewer auras and equipments because we only really need a few good ones. We don't need to run tons to make sure we hit any. And more importantly, they give us bodies in play to put those equipments on. There's a cool interaction in this deck with Faith Healer and Moldvine Cloak to guarantee plenty of self-mill while also gaining 3 life each turn, which, you know, isn't bad, while also providing another body on the board in the form of Faith Healer itself, which we can use our auras and equipments to buff up. On top of this, running cards like Sun Titan and Savine's Reclamation can help the deck be a little bit more resilient with all this self-mill going on. And it's just a cool list. I think it's actually one that we could really sink your teeth into and figure out how to get it to tick. Do you have any tips here, Wallet Man?
Celestine Living Saint seems good.
I actually love that. Do that. And for the final deck, it wasn't just the hook for the video. I am being serious. This is the deck that I'm probably going to build most likely. It's a very cool idea. We've got Gimli, Mournful Avenger. Gimli is 1, a red and a green for a 3/2. Gimli, Mournful Avenger has indestructible as long as 2 or more creatures died under your control this turn. Whenever another creature you control dies, put a 1/1 counter on Gimli. When this ability resolves for the 3rd time, Gimli fights another creature you don't control. Excuse me? Excuse me? This guy's good. How many decks? 781 decks. What's wrong with you guys? This commander's very cool, and I have a way to make it even cooler. Now, you might look at this and go, Nick, it's a straightforward token deck. You run tokens, you run sack outlets. That's why it's not that good, because it's green-red. Not a lot of sack outlets you can run. And I say, you know what? That's actually a pretty good point. There's better token decks that have access to black. You're 100% right. Even if they have access to white, that's easier than just being, you know, green-red. Except for with Eldrazi Scions and Eldrazi Spawn tokens. We can sack these little Eldrazi guys for 1 colorless at any time. So at any moment, we can crack 3 of them to give our commander indestructible and have it fight something. Pretty useful. But those Eldrazi Scions and Spawns also make us 1 colorless mana. So if we pack the deck full of giant spells like Artisan of Kozilek, Blightsteel Colossus, you have a super strong deck because your commander's getting huge. Your commander has built-in removal, has built-in protection. You have swarms of tokens that you can just choose to go that route if you want to, or you can sack all of those tokens to start playing these giant late game threats. And you might say, Nick, is there enough stuff that makes these tokens to even consider running it? Yes, there very much is. I've made short little lists for each of these decks. If you want to look at them, they're not full decks. They're just a handful of cards that kind of suggest the direction that I would go with the deck. Looking up how many cards produce Scion and Spawn tokens, there's enough. And they're honestly pretty decent. Cards like Awakening Zone and Void Attendant can fill our board with Eldrazi Scions and Spawn tokens to help fuel this list. What I love about this deck is that it looks like it's just a token deck when you play it. You're just making a ton of Scion tokens, you're flooding the board. A lot of the stuff that makes Scion and Spawn tokens are just creatures in of themselves, so you're flooding the board with those as well. You can run a couple board buff cards like Overwhelming Stampede in here and decide to go to the token route if you want, or you can just sack these tokens and go the playing extremely late game threats in the mid game because I have all these tokens and all this floating mana. Or we can just use Rogue's Passage and smack face with our giant Gimli, because Gimli is also getting +1/+1 counters this whole time. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video that almost smacked my boom arm, which would have been hilarious. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, share, do all that stuff. We're trying to get this channel to get a little bit more traction out there, a little bit more leeway, headway, a little bit more blank way. So if you'd like to do that, that'd be great. I've been talking a lot. It's getting a little hot. Daddy's shedding a layer. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, like, subscribe, share, do all that stuff. If you want to show a little bit of additional support, like the people that you see above my blurry mug right now, you can head over to the Patreon. It's in the comments, description. Starts as low as $1. Helps out the channel a ton. Send this video to your hipster friend who doesn't make commander decks that are mainstream. Tell him I said what's up.